Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Mia and to this afternoon's program. Sorry, I've been doing a lot of evening things, as you can tell from what I just said. My name is Leslie Ureña, and I am Associate Curator of Global Contemporary Art here at Mia. And we are very happy to welcome all of you this afternoon to this program, the first in conjunction with our just opened exhibition, The Shape of Time, Korean Art After 1989 from the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And I have a plug here for upcoming programming linked to the exhibition. So this is just the first out of other programming. And please keep a lookout on our website for maybe additional programming that will be coming. So these are hyperlinked to the exhibition webpage. So please take a look. And we hope to welcome you again. We are so excited to share this exhibition with you, which really complements and highlights Mia's own concerted efforts to present art from across the globe. It is my immense pleasure today to welcome the exhibition's co-curators for this presentation and conversation, and we look forward to your questions during the Q&A. It has truly been an honor to work with Elisabeth and Hyunsoo and many PMA colleagues and Tae, who's also here, and I am immensely grateful for their trust as we've brought this meaningful project to Mia. Elisabeth Agro, who is the Nancy M. McNeil Curator of Modern and Contemporary Craft and Decorative Arts at the PMA, and is an internationally recognized specialist in the field of modern and contemporary craft and decorative arts. Elisabeth's curatorial purview includes craft made in global contexts, working collaboratively with colleagues, as I've learned very much through the organization of this, and artists to advance an international view of contemporary decorative arts. Hyunsoo is the Pappas Serbane's Deputy Director for Collections at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and formerly held the position of Maxine and Howard Lewis Curator of Korean Art and head of the East Asian Art Department. She's a leading authority in the field, and her curatorial interests span traditional to contemporary Korean art. Hyunsoo has been instrumental in organizing groundbreaking exhibitions that illuminate various aspects of Korean art. And in addition to the present exhibition that I hope you either had a chance to see or will have a chance to see while it's on view through June, she curated the highly acclaimed exhibition, Treasures from Korea, Arts and Culture of the Joseon Dynasty, 1392 to 1910 from 2014. And it was with a catalog from Yale University Press, and also the first major exhibition dedicated to the subject of Korean art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The exhibition then traveled to Los Angeles, to the LACMA, to the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and the MFA Houston. Please join me in welcoming Elisabeth and Hyunsoo. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Leslie. I'm Hyunsoo, one of the co-curators of the exhibition, and Elisabeth Agro, another co-curator of the exhibition, and Tae, our wonderful exhibition assistant, also here. And despite the challenges that we have to share the podium with a microphone, and the noted height difference. We very closely bonded throughout the process, and we cannot be enemies anymore of each other because we know too much about each other. And it is our ultimate pleasure to have an opportunity to share this exhibition, which was totally a labor of love for us to share with your audience at MIA. And thank you so much for choosing this program for this afternoon, this weekend. And I'm sure that there are so many fun programs out there, and so glad to have this many people in this presentation. And as Leslie briefly mentioned, this exhibition, The Shape of Time, Korean Art After 1989, was conceived back in 2015. And it was in the making of almost 10 years. And of course, usually it takes about 5 years of mounting this kind of exhibition, but pandemic didn't really help us, at all. So finally came out in 23, and 24 we are sharing with you. And so I'm gonna So before, so around 2014, that's when Psy just debuted in the world stage. If you remember Gangnam Style, everyone was dancing with his tune. And before that time, the strongest image of Korea probably was North Korea, our sister country, so to speak, and or Korean War. But Psy really made a huge difference in terms of image of Korea and people's interest in Korea. And merely within 10 years, you probably recognize every single image on the slide right now that, BTS, of course, it's the biggest, the hit, following Beatles, and Squid Game, which came out during the pandemic, Netflix, not a very successful show. And Parasite, of course, which was the first movie that won the Oscar, non-English based the movie. And so, it's really a wonderful kind of timing that we came out with this exhibition. And in a way, these people wore the red carpet for us. And it's proven further that it's really the right timing to share this wonderful exhibitions with the audience in the States, because we're not the only one who came out. LA County Museum in fall, they did a wonderful exhibition of modern art. And then in summer 2023, V&A in London, they came out with a slightly different angled exhibition about Korean pop culture, which just opened in MFA Boston, and it's going to travel to San Francisco Asian Art Museum. So, the interest and the people's enthusiasm is really proven in this mini presentation of the exhibition. And on the East Coast, Guggenheim 2023, they around the same time that we came out, they opened experimental art in Korea, 1960s and 70s. And what's amazing is that we know all these colleagues, but never talked to each other about what we are working on. But chronologically, it really lined up in an amazing way. And but I have to say, our show is the best. And no. And looking at the presentation here, we create curatorial team with Elisabeth and Tay agree that your presentation even better than our original presentation at PMA. So kudos to everyone who made it possible, Mia, and I really hope that you'll enjoy the exhibition here. So, need the mic. This exhibition, The Shape of Time, Korean Art After 1989, is really looking at contemporary artists who have a shared experience of being Korean. So that really means for us and for the artists we're bringing forward, they're either born, raised, and educated and are living and working in Korea. They've been born, raised, educated in Korea and come to the West to be further educated and are now living in the West. Or they may be of Korean descent and like Korean American, based here in the U.S. So they really full range of artists. Our presentation had more artists, and this presentation has 25 that presenting here at MIA, which that happens when you travel the show. And the idea around The Shape of Time comes from a book from George Kubler. With its title, The Shape of Time, where we're paying our respect to a theorist who published a book in 1962. And he really thought about what objects do in history and how art historians and museums present those objects. He thinks of them as time travelers. And so that really fascinated us to think about, even in contemporary times, like how can objects of our time be time travelers? And in this case, it's really about the idea around a temporal condition, something that we call temporal dissonance. And we chose this sort of idea to think about the fact that past, present, and future are really not linear. That time is a man-made construct, and we organize our lives around these ideas around past, present, and future in order to give order and meaning to our memories, to things that we wish to happen in the future. And it really calls into question, and I ask this of you right now, like, are we actually really present? If depending on your faith, or if yoga is your religion, they always will ask, to be in the moment, right? I mean, how many times do we hear this these days? Well, that's because you're constantly thinking about last week or something a project that you may have presented. I'll be thinking about this. Did I do this well? I'll be thinking about it tomorrow. And I'm thinking about also tomorrow and the snowstorm and like all these sorts of things. So I've got to right now, like, get a grip, Elisabeth. I'm here with you right now. So this idea of past, present, and future and this nonlinearity is really what fascinated us. And it's that temporal condition that we're bringing forward using Kubler and this idea of objects traveling through time and how their meaning changes depending on where you are and your point of view. The exhibition is organized in 5 sort of themes, and we start off with this beautiful object that is presented very similarly as our presentation. And the slides that you'll be seeing are from the PMA's presentation, given that this just opened. And you have in front of you a really beautiful 11-foot high, 1-ton totemic ceramic work by Sankuya, who's based in Athens, Georgia. He teaches at the University of Georgia and the head of the ceramics department, and this is called Monument for Parents. This work is really has a multiplicity of meaning. It really is very much a tribute to the sculptural work that he makes. He is, a ceramic artist by training, but he's thinking very sculpturally. He does make works that you can actually use, but for where his heart lives is this sort of 3-dimensional sculptural realm. His hero in sculpture is Max Beckmann, and if you know Max Beckmann's work, you can understand that grotesque sort of many characteristics and personalities that run through those paintings, very abstract. And in this case, he is celebrating and honoring his parents who died within a very short period of each other upon him being awarded to be able to go to Korea and do a residency. He was so excited about this residency. He would get to be in Korea for 6 months and be visiting with them, but they died just shortly before he was supposed to leave. And so upon his arrival in Korea, he experienced something that many people experience who lose their parents, this idea of displacement. Those of you who have, you understand what I'm talking about. You all of a sudden lose your home. You lose the place that you are coming from. And that is a universal truth, something that we've baked into this exhibition. And so he is straddling this idea of where he belongs. He's lost his footing in Korea and he never feels American enough to be in this country. So where is he? And he's lost sort of in translation and this sort of straddling of this position of home. The first section of our exhibition speaks to dissidence, and you'll be experiencing that here. The artists and works in this section address the paradoxes of a divided Korea, as well as the atrocities that took place before and during and after the war. And so this idea of displacement comes into play. So one of the works that you are going to experience in this space is these 2 chandeliers, and created by the artist Kyung-ah Ham. And you didn't hear this from me, but this is my top choice. And we cannot talk to any other artist for many, many reasons, because this work is full of surprises. And first of all, the medium, you probably think that either they're painting or photographs, but indeed, this is a thickly embroidered work. And this is a work that you really have to look at up close, to the point that you cannot really harm the artwork's safety. And not only the medium, the way that it was produced is also amazing, because Kyung-ah Ham is a South Korean artist, born in 1966. And I also am the same generation, and I grew up in Korea and lived there until I came here at the age of 27. And people, when I was in elementary school, it's so common to find North Korean propaganda materials on the street. And if you grab it, the protocol is that you have to run to the police station to report that, and you're going to be awarded with the pencil and notebook and all that. So that's the way to gather the materials. And of course, South Koreans were doing the same thing to North Korea. And Kyung-ah, the artist who living in the middle of downtown of Seoul, she came across this material in 2010. And she was really surprised that are people still doing that? And yes, our government is still doing that to North Korea. So there she started pondering on if there is any way me as an artist can build a relationship with North Korea, which is completely illegal and banned. So she started an experiment by printing this design on piece of fabric, cotton fabric, and she found a middleman who was living in North Korea and South China border, or North Korean expats who are living in Russia who go travel back and forth, hire them and ask them to smuggle this piece into North Korea with an explicit instruction how to complete this work by the North Korean artisans, and that's how it was done. And the initial set was 10, and 10 printed fabric, and it came back 8 after a year. And, so she continued this work until, 2023 for 13 years. It's amazing, effort. And all the transaction has to be secret. They would meet up in China, usually women's bathroom, because that's the no surveillance camera, in the entire airport. So that's just the work that she did. And if you look at closely, there is a seam line in the vertical or horizontal. And that's the evidence that these people in North Korea, they cut up the pieces because, like congregating as a big group of people in that kind of society is really a dangerous act. So they would complete their own work and then conjoin after, they're done and ready to export back to Korea. So there are just so many layers and layers of meaning, and I really highly recommend that you spend enough time to really enjoy this work and admire the artist's intention and effort. Yeah. And another work that you will run into in this space next to each other is the Ulji Theater, and it's created by photographer Yeondu Jung. It's panoramic photograph, obviously. And there are a lot happening in this picture. And this picture itself was taken at one of the 13 observation deck along the DMZ. If you know the concept of DMZ, and there's a demilitarized zone, and that was the dividing line between North and South Korea at after the ceasefire of the Civil War in 1953. So there are 13, observation places that people can visit. And so he visited, and he had a plan to produce 13 works taken at each location. And people who are sitting there as just regular visitors of the day who signed up for the trip. And the guy standing in the middle is an actor that he hired. And, there are so many layers of time, buried in this, because you were talking about the division of North and South in 1953. And then he entered that space in 2019 to do the work. And then the actor who was hired is kind of recreating the actual historic event that took place in 1992. So the blue swimming suit is, Korean people would recognize that that's a uniform swimming suit for beauty pageant, swimming suit contest. What's more surprising is that 1992, the organizer of the beauty pageant contest decided to have the swimming contest right at this location, because it could be one of the distraction tactics, that could distract the North Korean soldiers. And of course, North Koreans were doing the same thing, by having young, beautiful, slender, female soldiers bathe on the stream, because it's really close proximity. You can see each other. So the military uniforms hanging on the right side is the North Korean female military uniform. So it's really an amazing concept. And then, the green lush that you see, that's actually DMZ. And it's very different than what you imagine, associated with the war and ceasefire. It's just a depository of ecosystem. So that's.
And I'll just add that, like Kangang's work, in terms of this idea of wanting to talk or, connect with the North Koreans, in this one image, you're as close to North Korea. Well, first, the site is the closest you'll ever get. But by taking a photograph of North Korea from the South, you're actually unifying in this one image. And although there's lots of ambivalence about those feelings, they still exist in terms of this idea of connection, because they used to be one country divided by outside forces. This is the work of Minok Lim, and she this very unusual body of work that she had started her career really making a video-based work, and like many artists, and these artists in this exhibition are what we call first-generation artists, who were allowed, permitted to leave the country of their own free will. After 1989, you might question, like, why Korean art after 1989? And we use 89 as an inflection point, because it was when the travel ban, an international travel ban, was lifted. You could travel before, but you would have had to ask permission from the government. You would have either been a government official, you would have done it for educational purposes, or as a businessman. You would have also had to pay a very hefty fine, a fee, to be able to leave. But you couldn't have just said, oh, I want to see the ruins of Rome, and get a passport and go. So many of these artists were able to go outside of Korea and go to schools elsewhere. Minook went to France to the École des Beaux-Arts to study. And upon her return, like any of you that may have experienced, like with your college age kid, when they come home and they have so much to teach you that you didn't know that a dishwasher could be stacked in a different way, or an omelet could be used with blue cheese. And like, I'm learning so much right now in my home. But it's not about criticizing, she tells me. It's about making me better. So with that, I mean, and I make fun of my own situation, but this is not, it's serious. So when you leave your home and you come back, you might have a different way of receiving the information of your past and what's happening in your government currently. And you do want to improve. You do want to call into question, and also, but that comes into these artworks. These are first generation artworks. And Minook did that with this body of work. At the time she came back, there were commissions on the radio and TV about some tragedies and atrocities that had taken place before the Korean War, before 1950. And it was very, very politicized time. It was about a fight between democracy and communism, and the Korean government, South Korean government, were trying to keep as democratic as possible, and neighborhoods were questioned, communities were questioned, and people were murdered, massacred en masse. These graves were found later on, and in this case, these walking sticks represent a man who gathered these sticks, who had been almost a victim of one of these mass atrocities. He survived and then lived to tell the tale, so to speak. Every day in his life, he would walk in the area near where this took place in his community and gather a stick, a walking stick, and lovingly tended to it, removing its bark, maybe putting notches in it. These represented the souls of his family, his neighbors, his community. He amassed over 3,000 of these and was able to tell his story when these commissions were happening. Minook heard this and connected to Mr. Chai as his name. And at some point, as he was becoming elderly, he entrusted and gave the sticks to her in order, here we go with time, to make sure that the story would be told into the future. So it's about the past coming into that present to then be continually reminded into that future. So like we know for other atrocities in the world, like so that people never forget and never repeat. And so she took these ready-mades, these walking sticks, and did varied bodies of works over a 10-year arc period. These are the final aspects of these walking sticks. They're called portable keepers. Keeper meaning curator, the caretaker, portable, the walking part, and then she added other ready-mades in order to transmit these messages, but also these souls, and bring them into this present day. Here we have a wonderful slide of what it took to like what we do, how we make the exhibition. Some of them had to hang from the ceiling, and some were meant to be embedded into a deck. And we couldn't just with magic, let them hover while we sort of figured out where they go. Here are our art handlers holding them in place. We could only have one chance to drill in the deck, and if we got it wrong, yeah, well, we won't tell you what would happen then. It would be a mess. So here we are sort of organizing where these would hang, and a little to the left, a little to the right, come forward, and then drill it and make it happen, make the magic happen. So in this section of dissonance, we also were talking about not just atrocities, but we also are talking about other sort of conditions that the government gets involved in. In this case, under the subject heading of urban renewal, the betterment of a community, progress. We all experience this, and this is not unique to Korea. Again, one of these universal truths that we baked into the show. This is the work of Juri Kim, and it's called Evanescent Landscape, Hyunsoo. Hyunsoo is the neighborhood on the outer ring of Seoul. Seoul is, if you've ever been, and if you haven't, I encourage you to go. It's like Los Angeles on steroids. It is so large in many rings, and this is in the very outer ring. This neighborhood was targeted, and this was a neighborhood that Juri Kim, the artist, had her studio. And so she watched her community disappear right in front of her eyes. These are unfired clay houses from the 70s and 80s period. And she builds them in this unfired state. And then her point is about absence and loss, and also about impermanence. And so at Philadelphia, the point was to pour water on them every day in the base and watch them disintegrate during the 16-week run of the show. It was very, very powerful. Many people in Philadelphia, there's a lot of gentrification happening in and around Philadelphia. And we have a little clip here to show you her process and hear her words and see.
저는 끊임없이 변화되고 생성과 소멸을 반복하고 있는 이 세계에 대한 이야기와 시간에 대한 은유를 지속하고 있습니다. 저한테서 작업을 제안할 때 어떤 경험은 가장 중요한 순간이기도 합니다. 이 휘경주택 시리즈가 처음 시작되었던 2007년, 2008년에는 서울에서 한참 재개발 붐이 일었었던 시기였습니다. 제 작업실도 서울에 있는 이 주택가에 있었고, 제 작업실을 포함한 주변의 마을이 다 철거가 되고 폐허가 되는 광경을 목격을 하게 되면서 이 작업을 시작하게 되었습니다. 좋고 싫음 혹은 옳고 그름이 아니라 그렇다라는 것입니다. 그 사람은 마치 흙으로 빚어져서 흙으로 돌아간다는 말처럼 그런 현상을 보여주는 것입니다. 주택들을 실제 했던 집들을 저는 흙으로 다시 재현을 합니다. 이 흙으로 재현된 집들은 인위적으로 부어지는 물에 의해서 점점 와해되어 가는 과정을 이 전시장에서 보여주게 됩니다. 이 흙과 물이 만났을 때 작가인 저는 전혀 개입할 수 없습니다. 물이라는 것은 우리 삶의 어떤 원천이기도 하고 삶을 영위해주는 어떤 중요한 요소이지만 동시에 우리 삶을 위협하는 존재이기도 합니다. 형태는 사라지고 변하고 있지만 이 지능은 남아있게 됩니다. 우리가 태초에 바닷속에 어떤 진흙에서 생명이 탄생했듯이 저는 이 진흙이 어떤 무로 돌아간다고 생각하지 않습니다. 이 진흙은 다시 생명을 가질 수 있고 다시 어떤 가능성을 가질 수 있는 상태로 돌아가게 됩니다.
So I have to add one sentence to that houses that I know that you have a parasite screening planned and you'll be seeing this house. One of the families featured in the film is living in one of these houses, which is very typical of a middle class house. And we have some issues because of the way it's constructed, and you will see in the movie.
She doesn't want to spoil it for you. So the next section of the show is reinvention, and this is, in this exhibition, a new generation of artists were keen on infusing traditional aesthetics with contemporary sensibility. And they're addressing topics like resilience and transformation, while simultaneously re-examining the past. The works that are on view in the section point to the intersection of tradition and innovation.
So one of the works that you have in this section is, this wonderfully funny, strange portrait of Michael Jackson that we know. And yes, we definitely recognize the sitter, but it's created in a very different format. And it's created by artist Hyunsoo, who was born in 1980. And in the Korean art school system, if you go to art school to study painting, there are two divisions. One is Oriental paintings, and the other is Western painting. Based on the material, colors, ink on paper, you go to Asian section, and acrylic, oil, and canvas, you go to another section, which doesn't really make sense anymore, but they still have that system. So this artist went into Asian Oriental painting section, and he learned all the skill sets that he could learn, and he could even become a court painter of 18th century if he wanted to be, because he mastered all the skill sets. And he really started thinking, what am I gonna be doing with skill sets? I'm a 21st century artist, and I don't really want to recreate what my ancestors created. So he started doing some experiments, and he initially started drawing portraits of dramatized figures like Batman, Superman, and the Princess Fiona. It's really hilarious, funny, and interesting. And he then after that experiment moved on to a real person series, and then he chose Michael Jackson, who was his hero growing up. And he chose Michael Jackson because everyone knows him, and creating portrait in Asia is actually considered to be a noble action compared to other subjects, because you not only have to create a painting with a closest resemblance of the sitter, but you are also supposed to convey the person's essence, inner essence and personality and spirit and everything. So he chose his Michael Jackson, his hero, to study him. And because he never had a chance to meet with his sitter, he had to watch every single video, music video that he created, every single appearance that he made, in the mass media. And, so in this series, he created 40 Michael Jackson paintings, and that's the number of albums that he released during his lifetime. And as you can see, there's a Jackson 5, Little Michael, and then it's all the way towards the end of his time. And here, there are two types of formats that you see here. One is a wooden chair with a leopard skin, and the other is, red chair. And red chair is only observed for a king. That's a king's throne. So he started creating Michael Jackson's portrait with that particular format when he was being, called the Pop-Up King since 1989. So that's really wonderful amalgam of his Korean painting tradition and his new idea. So we really wanted to let people know there are like many Korean artists who are combining their inheritance and their heritage, and then making that into a wonderful visual language of their own.
So this is the work of Yi Suk-young, and she too is sort of tapping into sort of her heritage in this Moonlight Crown series. And in this series, she's looking at women as well. Hers is very much more conceptually based, and it packs a powerful punch. So she's really thinking about women and the fact that, in any culture, women tend to be aligned with the moon. For many reasons. It's this idea of like the fact that we have a light side and a shadow. And these are just that. The works are presented with their light side, with the pieces in the front, and the pieces to the left are their shadow. They are constructed through a form that some of which are produced using CAD. So she's using technology to create the substrate, and then using resins to coat and place, and then Korea has these wonderful, wonderful markets that you can go to. And there's one that's just for like all these sorts of notions, little bits and baubles and, beads and such. And so she's using these bits to insert on the surface, and you'll see them in the show. She explained to us that it's very meditative for her when she makes these works. She comes from a long line of shamans. So for her, it's almost like trance-like as well. And the shaman piece is very important in her work, that aspect of her spirituality, because the tradition part is that she's very much referencing the myth of Bari. Bari is considered the godmother of all shamans. And for those of us in the West, it's not one-to-one, but you could liken it to Persephone, how she's 6 months on Earth and 6 months in the underworld. Bari is the seventh daughter, a throwaway child, so to speak, wanting a son that was never had. But in the end, she has to save her family. And in doing so, she has to go into the underworld, get married, have a kid, raise the kid, and then go on to then become victorious to save her family. And Yusuk very much relates to Bari as a descendant of a very well-known shaman, and uses that in her work. And so this is the ideas of using that myth and using those traditions to bring forward these very extraordinary and beautiful objects. So one of the sections in the show, and it's ordered differently in here in Minneapolis, it's portraying anxiety. And in this case, portraits can act not just as representation of a person, but also a reflection of a culture in which people live. They raise questions about the act of looking and being looked at, as well as about the place of an individual within a collective. And so this section looks at the very different ways that identities are formed, whether structures that we absorb or the imposed status upon us. And so here we are juxtaposing two sets of portraits. One was Byron Kim's Synecdoche, and then this body of work, 7 portraits by Hyunsoo, which are part of a series called Portraying Anxiety, for which we've lifted the section title. This is called Left Face. And you'll see that these portraits were the way he organized them was putting an ad out there to ask for sitters, and he asked them to come dressed as they wish to be seen. Now, most of us who have a portrait when we go, we want to look either our very best, or we want to impart a message about ourselves from our garb, what our makeup looks like, what our accessories are. But what he's interested in is what's happening beneath the surface. And he photographs the sitter on a neutral background in order to remove any context. And so what he's hoping you'll see, and when you line them up and you'll see in the gallery, it's very much about what's going on beneath the facade. And what you're seeing in his words are islands of anxiety are coming to the surface. And we all have this, and he's very interested in that aspect of the portrait, not necessarily who you are or how you wanted to present yourself. So another section of the show is coexistence. And in 1989, South Korea was among many countries that experienced democratic reform and an increased global connectivity. And that was due to the World Wide Web being invented in 1989. So another significant moment in 1989 that we are interested in. And so, you know, this development of democratic ideals and increasing international connections conflicted with ideologies of collectivism that are very rooted and ingrained in Korean culture. And so this section explores those outcomes of globalization and the challenges to a broader Korean society.
So one of the work introduced in this section is this headless manufactured portrait created by Korean-American artist Michael Ju. And here you see a wonderful, combination of Western and Eastern culture. And as a American boy born to Korean parents, and he has to straddle two different worlds every day. At home, he has to be really a proper Korean boy. When you go to school, he has to mingle with American boy as one of them. So this not only represents his cultural status as dual culture that he had to deal with entire his life, but he also comments on the globalization in terms of this manufacturing system, and the Buddha body that you see is made out of nerve. You would not imagine if you look at them. And we learned that nerve was invented in Minneapolis, so we have a great association with that. And then the paired heads are toy heads. And you would recognize at least a few of toy heads, depending on your age group and generation. So he collected those throughout 3 years of period by browsing flea markets. So he just combined them. It's a wonderful way of combining two words that he's dealing with. And there was another twist that all these toy heads, they're designed here, but then they're all produced, manufactured in Asia, and then they're imported back. So, it's a wonderful coexistence and, the globalization aspect that he's contemplating on through this work. And this is another, a picture that shows what we do at the museum before before you see the exhibition as a final product. So this is our objects conservator who's doing condition report, meaning that you have to check the condition every single leg of travel, so that we know if there is anything happen during the transition, and then we know who to go to for insurance. So it's a very important action, and she's using this ping pong table and trying to look at all this works. And then the next slide also shows how we are hanging the toy heads, and so it's really a lot of work get into the production of the exhibition.
So one of the last sections is being seen. And this is about our Korean society's long-held values of homogeneity and respect conflict with newly embraced ideals of the individual. And the artists in this section are using a variety of media, which was very important to us, by the way. You'll see this exhibition really runs the gamut of all sorts of media, from lacquer to photographs to video to unfired clay. And so they're challenging patriarchal power structures and accepted norms, and they're bringing forward identities and experiences that are often marginalized, silenced, or erased. And so, this work that you're seeing on the screen is by Uni Kim Lang. She's the youngest artist in the exhibition, and is based in Texas. This is called Comfort Hair, and it's from her Woven Identity series. This is propylene rope and synthetic hair that she's woven into these large plaited braids to create sort of a nest, if you will. And she's referencing Korean gache, which are wigs that were worn during the Joseon Dynasty. And before, I guess, Confucianism really came on strong, which really sort of had people sort of not dress ornately or wear these fashionable wigs, but they were a symbol of status, and they were very weighty though. And the more impressive that you were, the more higher in the system of society, the larger the wig and the more adornment it would have. She's using this idea of its weight is not so much about importing or telegraphing who you are. It's more about the imposition that are put upon women. The idea using hair, which is a very much for any culture, is very much a signifier of status or pressure, if you will, and that weight that she bears for her gender. She always has to activate the work. And last night she laid down in the work, as you see on the right, to activate it, to bear the burden of her gender. And it was extremely powerful in Philadelphia, and it was extremely powerful here last night. Also, the title is referencing the comfort women that were put into sexual slavery during Japanese occupation and during World War II. So she's definitely talking about that trauma and that history and that burden. Okay, we're going to race it through here.
So a few works that we were not able to bring it here due to space constraints and some conditions of the work that each work has. So this work is done by Hyunsoo, and what's written on the floor is the names of the queer bars in Philadelphia. And the material is powder incense. The incense stick was ground into powder, and he just came up with a design, and he presented this throughout the world. And always the first step has to be the researching of the names of the queer history, names of queer bar and their history, and that was done in Philadelphia. And another work is this massive floating house, and you probably recognize the name Do Ho-seo, and he is probably the most well-known international Korean artist. And he creates this again, idea of concept of home through this floating house or folded. And this is silk organza, and it's 1-to-1 scale recreation of the childhood house that he grew up. And we also had some wonderful seating created by a leading furniture artist, Ji Eun-ha. And again, not every museum has a space that can have this kind of giant house, but you have a wonderful Doho's work in the collection that's more than a compliment to the exhibition. Some won, and that's very prominent, displayed in the gallery. And this was really, the monster that we created. It's a sculpture created with Neutrogena soap bars, melted. And we create a huge block of soap, and the artist Mi Kyung-shin, who is known for her material, active in London and Korea, and she carved down the figures. The 3 sculptures that were supposed to be part of 13 sculptures to adorn part of our building, which was never realized because it was 1930s. So we had a maquette and drawing, and she took that as an inspiration. So those are 3 works that we were not able to bring forward to you. But if you visit our social media, there are wonderful, record of it. So I think we spent 10 minutes more than we are given.
But we'll transfer over and open for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Elisabeth and Hyunsoo. Please have a drink of water if you'd like before we get started. I have just 2 questions, and then we'll open it up to the floor for all of our guests here. The title, you touched on the title a bit in terms of Kugler and time. But one thing that I've been thinking about as this exhibition, as we were translating the exhibition for our spaces, how did the title inform the selection of artists and artworks, or vice versa?
Well, we didn't really have any idea, about the title or even the concept or theme when we started, our research. It was more of visiting so many artists and just enjoy the conversation and their works. And, we were on the research mode for good 5-6 years. And along the way, we started seeing some of the groupings and themes, and that's what we boiled down to. And we still had to come up with this thesis of the exhibition, so to speak. And the pandemic was really wonderful opportunity. We hunkered down, everyone was locked down and not going to the office. So there we really the time was really the initial concept, but we haven't made much progress up to that point. But, pandemic really screwed our sense of time. And we kind of restarted that thought of, that line of thoughts. And that's, I think, how we came up and, refined the initial thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, time, like Hyunsoo said, was something we thought of early on, but it was very much in a basic way, like how long it takes to learn how to use lacquer, how long it would take to get skilled to make the work that these artists make. But then it conceptually came together, and then lockdown really reinforced. We really felt that, would people understand this idea of nonlinearity? Now, unless you're totally into science fiction, which I am, any Star Trek people out there will understand about the time continuum and whatever. I won't go into all that. But more importantly, I realized, and Hyunsoo realized, that the fact that we were living in this state of not knowing past, present, you're like, what would tomorrow bring? What, like the amnesia of what happened the month before. The fact that we don't even remember the three, like, I don't know about you, like it's a blur, right? And the fact that one day bled into the next, that bled into the next month, which bled into the next year. And so we felt that this idea of nonlinearity would really make sense, that people would connect to this exhibition just based on that experience. But also Shape of Time and Kubler, I mean, like Kubler, and the full title of that book, and it's a really interesting little book that you should read. It's The Shape of Time, Remarks on the History of Things. And it was published in 1962. And it's very archaic in its like terminology, classifications. I wouldn't say would be written that way today in terms of how he speaks of ancient cultures, but how he speaks about three-dimensional objects is really important. And as a theorist, that he's been forgotten and is lost out to those of you who are into the whole theory bit. Walter Benjamin is very, at the top. And then there's, what's his name? I'm forgetting someone else very important. I'm spacing out right now. But the point is, like, we should really have a revisit with Mr. Kubler, because he allows us to think about these objects and how their meaning shifts based on where they're being shown. And in an art museum, they will mean different things to different people as we march through time.
You mentioned the word straddling, and for some of the artists, and also and when you mentioned that, I thought about the two of you straddling when a pandemic, and also different fields. And I hope we all would love to hear more about even the process of selecting these artists. You were in deep research for almost a decade, but then pandemic strikes. You were traveling, going back and forth, and you're also coming from different fields. So it'd be wonderful to hear about your working process and your collaboration for the last decade, and the friendship too.
I'll start first. Yes, I'm coming from Asian, art background. I was born and raised in Korea until I came here at the age of 27. And so Korea was very natural to me. And, I've been a curator of Korean art for many years. So whenever I do an exhibition, I try not to lose balance, because, I don't want to assume everyone knows about Korea. That was really humbling experience when I first came in mid-1990s. They are like, which Korea did you come from? North Korea, South Korea? I was like, what is wrong with you? There is only one Korea. So when you live in South Korea, there really is no existence of North Korea in your day-to-day. So I really try to strike the balance. And but because this is so close to my own heart and practice, I sometimes don't understand what's going to be more interesting to American non-Korean audience. And that in that way, that was really wonderful collaboration between myself and Elisabeth and a few other museum, educators. They'll always tell us that, oh, this is very different than, what you do in Korea, so people will be interested in. Or we also have a same practice, and, on the other side, that, they'll be interested in this because we have a similar kind of story. So that was really a great opportunity. And, you know, some of the material-based works that we are presented together with, so to speak, modified contemporary art, you know, installation, video, and paintings, it's definitely Elisabeth's contribution that's the world that she knows better than anyone. So, you know, it was really happy kind of collaboration.
That's true. So, you know, I do come, you know, obviously born and raised in the States, and the as much as we are different and we were born in different places in the world, and you know, unlikely that we would meet. I mean, but we did at PMA and through this project. We were from the same generation. And so the pop cultural things, you know, we both watched and grew up with I Love Lucy and Popeye and Michael Jackson. And, you know, the fact that we thought we were so different, but then there were things that were really a connection for us on a personal level. I would also add that I think even though there are things that are distinct about us in terms of where the cultures we were raised, the way our parents were and the fact that their value systems were very, very much the same. Our work practice is very much the same in terms of our commitment, our dedication, our like ethic of working. Our eye, it has like we gravitate. There's maybe only one or two things that we maybe didn't agree on, but came to consensus, which is pretty impressive for two people from totally disparate practices or like areas of study. And so that was really interesting. I would also just say that in terms of like the collaboration, you know, it was exciting for me to learn at mid-career an entirely different field. I am not an Asianist by training. It was an extremely daunting assignment. You know, to be asked to pull off a show that you could make so many missteps as a white woman from the West. And Hyunsoo was such a great partner, and I would say, I hope she would agree, that there was a lot of trust. We had an open, safe space that we could ask any question, and we would prevent the other one from a misstep. And so I was really, really blessed that she allowed me to learn. So for me, it was like doing a master's PhD all over again and digging deeply to understand this culture, almost deep end of the pool.
After all, she's more Korean than I am at this point.
I take that as a
She
compliment.
has more passion.
So I think the idea of finding a work of art where she would have dismissed it, not only like, I was like, oh my God, American public is going to love this work. And it actually explains a lot, especially like the individuality versus the collectivism piece. We like that, you know, those sort of differences are very distinct. And we just can't understand that. And so there'd be questions like, she'd be like, why do you people do this? And I'd be the same, like, why are you people doing this? You know, like to understand those base things and how do you bring that forward with respect? And that was my goal from my perspective.
Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. It'd be great to, if anyone has any questions, I'm sure Elisabeth and Hyunsoo would be happy to entertain them. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I love the title, Shape of Time. I just want to, just because you made the cultural comparison right at the beginning between BTS and the Beatles, when I was in sixth grade in 1964, my teacher said, you'll never know who the Beatles are 10 years from now. Nobody will ever know. So I don't know what'll happen with BTS, but so I like the way some of these pieces, unfortunately, some of the ones that can't travel changed over the course of the show. And I'm wondering, there was one, I think it was Jerry Kim, the evanescent landscape. Are you going to still be pouring water on it, or is it, where is it at?
It's in the state in which it was left in Philadelphia. So she came to install it. She was here for 2 weeks installing the work. So it is a recreation, a reinstallation of the houses in this moment of stasis, as I like to borrow that from Elisabeth, of this one scene there. So of that. And it gives you a sense of the houses in deterioration slowly, and gives you a sense of the landscape as the houses were crumbling. So, yeah.
So I actually saw the show in Philadelphia right before it closed. I did not realize it was coming back to my home state. And so I'm excited to see it here because you said it's a different presentation. My question was, how did you decide, what other museums that exhibit would come to? And is it going anywhere else after Minneapolis?
It's a whole science that you have to. So museums will often work together to produce an exhibition in so many different formats. And sometimes we just gather at the beginning of the exhibition that we're going to work together, and your museum, we're going to, travel the show all together. And in this case, we started out the process, and then, it was so, sad not to share this with any other ones, who were not able to see the show in Philadelphia. So we reach out to other museums to see if they have any openings in their schedule to share the exhibition. And we had to look for the venue during the pandemic, and and everyone's schedule was really far off their initial plan. So no one was able to commit to the exhibition. And Mia, we definitely wanted to be our first choice because of so many, huge connection to Korea, and there are many Korean adoptees living in this town. So there was no brainer. We reached out to Jennifer, and there were other exhibitions planned, or they just could not commit. And miraculously, around the opening of our exhibition, they're like, "Oh my God, is the show still available for travel?" And we are like, "Oh my God, it's meant to be."
It was a miracle. I mean, it was our first choice back in 2018. I mean, literally, and there's so many reasons, like Hyunsoo explained. So we believed it was always going to happen. Maybe like we didn't know it at the time, but when we got this news, it couldn't have been better, timing. So in terms of future, I mean, I don't know. We might have things that can't say, but light a candle. We'll see. It's a very hard business. These are very expensive. There's a lot of work to do when you do this. So it has to have all those sort of things have to line up. It's not an easy thing.
And I can say that, you kindly shared those photographs of your crew installing, and we benefited from their knowledge and deep expertise in organizing and installing these very complex works, and then had our crew here kind of, transmit brainwise, and then ingest all this information to do the installation here. So we have our images too, but it was really a labor that they've shared with us so much, which is we're really grateful for that. So, are there any, Oh, you have a microphone. Good. You have a question.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the show, especially about the wide variety of subject matters, experience of like Korean art and its globality and how its contemporaneity is experienced by the artist. And question is like the assumption of Korean in so-called a Korean art exhibition. For instance, did you have some plan to include artists who more identify with themselves with the North? Not necessarily the government of the North Korea, or non-Korean ethnic artists. I think about artists such as one of the greatest documentary artists in 1990s, Alan Sekula, whose photographs on 1993 Ulsan Hyundai shipyard, which I saw from Park Hyung-gun's work. I think it represents Korean's globality and global connectivity at the time. So this is my question, like your initial plan to include non-Korean artists or artists identify with North Korea?
Your question is very complex and challenging, but I'll try to answer that. I mean, there are so many different ways of doing an exhibition, right? And we also struggled at the beginning. Who are we, saying when we say Korean artist? And we came up with an idea that whoever can share Korean experience, lived experience, whether they're Korean or Korean Americans. And in terms of North Korean, and I know that these days there are North Korean de facto artists active in South Korea, but that just was kind of unknown territory for many, many years. And North Korea, very unfortunately, they're living on a different plane. And I had an experience trying to reach out to North Korea when I was working in New York on a totally different exhibition. And because there is one of the dynasties' capital located in North Korea physically today, we wanted to borrow 7th century Buddhist sculpture, wonderful work. And I try to reach out to them through so many different routes, like, politicians or businessmen or Korea society in New York. And after a year, I got an answer finally that the answer was really surprising that, you know, that work is so old, 7th century. Why do you need old work? We have a brand new replica made last year. You probably want to have the shiny work. That's when I realized that they're not really ready to be part of this conversation, you know, not in a negative way, but, you know, that's sort of the status. And so, I mean, you know, Korean artists, you know, trying to share their living experience, you know, that was just more than enough for us to be present this occasion. But I definitely wanted to, you know, talk about, for instance, the foreign labor situation in South Korea. Korea was known to be homogeneous for many, many, many years, which is not true anymore. Yeah, North Korean de facto artists is another aspect that I'm interested in. Maybe my next life.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to say that this was a conversation between Hyunsoo and me about what about North Korea? And, you know, it is complex, as you stated, and Hyunsoo gave a great answer. I will add that this show, we feel is like the beginning of a conversation. Like we are hoping, this is not the you know, like we've dropped the mic, you know, this is a moment for many next curators and people who are coming out of PhD programs to pick where we left off and take those intersections and go deeper and go wider. And so that's what I'm hoping will happen for this conversation. And of course, like, I hope this is not the end for me. I feel like I've amassed all this information and I love the culture and the art coming out of it. There's a lot more to say, right?
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? That seems like a wonderful place to end, but if there's one more, I don't want to keep you from it. No? Well, thank you, right? Yes, you can see. Thank you so much, Hyunsoo and Elisabeth, for sharing this exhibition with us and all of the scholarship and all of the hard work to organize this exhibition and sharing it with everyone here today. So thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.